Hello and welcome to Resident Evil 4. If you consider yourself a gamer, my guess is that you've seen this opening section plenty of times. However, I wanted to start at the very beginning. As soon as you gain control, new players are given ample time and space to try each button and become familiar with control of Leon. You can interact with your police escorts, but they don't have anything nice to say. Avoid getting too attached to these goons. Crows are literally your first enemy in the game, but these ones aren't hostile toward you. You'll have nowhere else to go besides the nearby house, with every other path being blocked. The cutscene we witness next is our first real step into Resident Evil 4. We learn in this interaction that the locals are hostile, and Leon has no choice but to use lethal force here.
Excuse me.
This guy is our tutorial enemy, so he serves to introduce the new laser sight system. Just like past Resident Evil games, you must plant yourself like a tree in order to shoot, but unlike those older games, you have much more control where you aim and shoot. With a little experimentation, you'll realize that shooting specific places on enemies will stun or stagger them. While they're staggered, Leon can perform a powerful melee attack, which is brand new to this game. It completely changes our character from a weakling into a martial arts master. If you're brand new to RE4, most fights boil down to shooting stagger points on enemies, hitting them with a melee attack, and proceeding to knife them while they're on the floor. It's kind of ridiculous nowadays, but it was cool back then. I've actually watched so many new players shooting enemies over and over just because that's how they want to kill them, which is just as effective, but you end up wasting a lot of ammo when instead you could optimize your damage by using every attack Leon has. I like that you aren't overwhelmed by sheer numbers of enemies in the opening, especially when you're getting comfortable with the controls. You'll eventually come across wooden boxes and barrels which are practically begging you to just smash them because they almost always contain something useful for Leon. Some boxes will contain a snake that can jump out and take damage, so you'll want to stay on your toes for that. In the game, you'll come across treasures too, and some will actually require a small amount of brain power to obtain. Like for this necklace, you gotta shoot the well closed, otherwise you'll drop it into this nasty, poop, and it'll make the treasure worth less. After your first encounter with enemies, you're gonna come across this dog, and this is the Resident Evil 4 dog. I mean, come on, everybody knows the Resident Evil 4 dog. It is totally optional to rescue this pup, and I wonder how many players actually leave this guy, or how many total psychopaths potentially shoot the poor thing. Either way, it's completely up to the player, and it may or may not affect gameplay down the pipe.
Hey, it's that dog.
Taking damage as Leon is a lot like the previous games in that you'll see a physical change to signal the low HP. When the health bar becomes yellow, you'll run at a reduced speed and Leon will hold his side. I've always been a strong believer that showing pain or damage on the player character is an engaging way to incentivize damage avoidance. I don't want my homeboy Leon to be stuck limping around. Besides that, I want to run around at top speed. Therefore, I'm going to avoid getting hurt. This first section is just a linear corridor with specific placements of enemies, and it shouldn't be too difficult for most players. It's honestly a breeze, and I appreciate that you have plenty of bad guys to get yourself comfortable with fighting. The section after this, though, is much more difficult. Its reputation literally precedes almost everything people know about Resident Evil 4. Of course, I'm referring to the village horde sequence. In my gameplay, I decided to run in a circle around the village, grabbing some useful herbs in case I needed them. I'm pretty sure this is the first instance of a yellow herb, which is a new variety added in Resident Evil 4. When the player combines any green herb with a yellow herb and eats it, It will increase Leon's maximum HP. I also felt like showcasing this one option for players, which is the ability to barricade yourself in this house. I'm pretty sure this is also the first time you see a padlock, and it teaches you that you might need to destroy locks in order to open a door. With the front door barricaded, you have time to explore a little bit. When you're ready to engage, you already have the upper hand. Large groups of enemies are extremely weak to Leon's melee attacks. It's like a ganado piñata. Dealing with crowds this way is so efficient, and you'll realize just how powerful you are compared to these infected. If you make your way into this specific house, you'll trigger a cutscene that introduces the iconic Chainsaw Man.
What are they planning? Chainsaw.
Or the Bagman. Or Dr. Salvador. You can call him whatever you want, he doesn't mind. In this house you'll also find the shotgun, and it's a perfect time to talk about the inventory screen. Your inventory is represented by a briefcase with a grid system. Every item takes a certain amount of grid spaces, and you're allowed to rotate and place things however they will fit. I cannot understate how much I love this frickin' suitcase system. Everything Leon picks up becomes a game of organization. You'll start thinking like it's Tetris in no time. This might sound funny to you, but I love seeing how different people like to organize their cases. I have spent literal hours just moving things around. There's just something so satisfying about the sounds and creating a ballistics aesthetic completely suited to your personal taste. Let me get this straight. The village sequence is deceptively simple. You just need to survive until an invisible timer reaches 0 or you kill enough ganado. You aren't even obligated to kill the Bagman, so if he's too challenging for you, you can feel free to avoid him. I downright adore this opening segment. It exemplifies almost everything about the rest of the experience, and the masterpiece of this game is the gradual escalation of sequences like this one. You'll essentially be walking through corridors with items and enemies, leading up to skirmishes with large groups of ganado. This is entirely different from previous Resident Evil games. Those games are not nearly as linear or set-piece focused, and they rely much more on disempowering the player rather than giving you flashy attacks to clear out waves of bad guys.
Where's everyone going? Bingo?
I think that Resident Evil 4 finds a clever balance though, especially thanks to an invisible adaptive difficulty system. Long story short, the game will fluctuate in difficulty depending on your proficiency at killing enemies and avoiding damage. Kill lots of enemies, avoid lots of damage, and the difficulty increases. If you fail to finish off ganados and you take a lot of damage, the difficulty will decrease. You'll continue playing like this, eventually meeting the famous merchant for the first time.
Over here, stranger.
Resident Evil 4 introduces a shop system allowing you to buy and sell firearms. Not only that, but you can also increase your case size and upgrade your weapons. As you make progress, you will gradually gain more and more power. Thankfully, the adaptive difficulty accounts for this too, so you won't feel absurdly strong if you're a new player. Truly, you are given abundant freedom to play the game however you like. Want to go combat crazy and massacre the hordes like a one Leon army? Do you want to avoid damage and finesse your way through segments? In Resident Evil 4, there are no wrong answers. Soon after you meet the merchant, you enter another remarkable horde sequence. This time, your goal is to find 2 halves of a gate key in order to continue forward. Just like before, you can run all around this area looking for useful items. If you feel like taking out every enemy on your way, you can. If you feel like making a beeline to the key pieces, you certainly can. I think this is a perfect example of the player's ability to play the way they find the most fun or comfortable. It might seem simple based on my presentation in this video, but I guarantee that this game only grows in complexity the further you get into it. The latter portions feature an escort mechanic, which I know some people are rolling their eyes at, but I would argue that it elevates the experience. You're not just taking care of yourself anymore. And the bottom line is that Ashley is a lot more competent than fans gave her credit for back when this was new. By the time you have Ashley by your side, I honestly believe most players should be good enough at combat to handle the new challenge of protecting her. Granted, there is an extremely hard section with Ashley, which would have to be the Waterhall level, but I don't want to spoil that part in this video. If you know, you know. Ultimately, I think the responsibility is on the player to avoid getting a game over. Well, I hope I provided a deeper look at this game's mechanics and potentially convinced someone to try Resident Evil 4 or give it that second shot. It won't be long until the remake comes out, and I couldn't imagine a better excuse to play the original. Admittedly, this was the first game in the entire series for me, so I can thank it for introducing me to the world of survival horror in the most spectacular and bombastic way possible. At the time, I went back and played Resident Evil 1, 2, and 3 on my PSP via the PS1 Classics you could purchase and download back then. But for now, I have my eyes set on the next divisive installment, Resident Evil 5. Thank you so much for watching. I'll catch you later.